I, 33 male, have been married to my wife, 30 female, for 7 years. It felt like my wife and I were working to get our life together for a long time. Eventually, we bought a house because I finally saved enough money. She was making money too, but it was barely above minimum wage. My job required that I travel a lot, and at the most I would be gone for 1 week at a time. We made it work by video calling and texting a lot. However, it became clear that my time away bothered her. She would go out with friends often and started doing that even when I was home. This was devastating to me because I thought if she loved me, she would spend as much time with me as possible. One night, we were both home and she was absorbed in her phone. I finally had enough and asked her what was going on. She became defensive immediately and said that she didn't feel close to me anymore because I wasn't home often enough. I reminded her that she suggested I get this job so we could afford nice things in life. She said she really enjoyed the relationships she had with her friends and needed that time to relieve stress. I asked her if I could meet her friends and she said no, that it would be awkward for her to combine her home life with her work life. I was deeply hurt and could tell I wasn't going to persuade her, so I dropped it for the time being. Soon I was told to go on another business trip. I told my wife it would be longer than it really was. When I came home, I could see a shirtless man through the front window of my house. I swear it was like my heart stopped beating. I assumed it was one of her coworkers, but when I got closer it turned out to be our married neighbor from down the street. Out of all the people my wife could be cheating on me with, it was someone I knew. He came to our house with his wife a month ago for a barbecue, and for all I knew that's when their affair started. I watched through the window easily, getting a clear view of them kissing and touching like they were a couple. I walked back to my car and called the guy's wife. These were neighbors we exchanged numbers with and asked to watch our house when we went away. She answered and I asked her if she knew where her husband was. She was very confused and said he was working late. I played it cool and just told her there was a package accidentally delivered to our house. She arrived minutes later to get the fictional package. I watched from my car as my wife opened the door in her robe. They talked for a moment, confused until the woman's husband came into view behind my wife. The woman started screaming and asking a lot of questions, trying to enter the house. As the scene escalated, I called my wife's parents. I told them it was nice knowing them and their daughter, but I was going to leave her because she cheated on me. They were shocked and started asking questions. I told them if they wanted to know what was going on, they could come to our house now for a surprise on what was happening. I wanted them to witness their daughter's affair in case she tried to spin the narrative. While they drove over, I walked straight into my house. My wife tried talking to me through yelling and sobs as she was being attacked by the other woman, and her husband tried holding her back. It was a huge mess and drama that I was not about to get caught up in. I went straight to the traveling bag that I kept packed in case of a short notice trip. I walked back out of the house and told my wife she needed to leave with her parents when they arrived. This confused and panicked her. She clarified that her parents were coming, and I simply nodded as I put my bag in my car. I sat in my locked car until her parents arrived and our neighbors refused to leave. The cheating man was trying to convince his wife to leave it alone, but she was not having it. She got in several slaps when my wife let down her guard and slapped her husband whenever possible. Obviously, all the questions in the world wouldn't make sense of unexpected infidelity. Nothing could soothe this betrayal. When my wife's parents arrived, I left. I don't know how they sorted out everything, but when I returned to my house one day later, the door was unlocked and a few things of mine were missing. After I filed for divorce, the calls, messages, and texts from my wife majorly increased. She was appalled by my sudden actions and wanted a chance to talk about what happened. I didn't care. I wanted a wife that wouldn't cheat on me, and I wasn't going to get that from her. She lived with her disappointed parents, and at the divorce hearing, she looked ragged and tired. She didn't work the same job anymore, and certainly didn't look happy. I found a ton of support from my friends and family, while everyone turned against her because of her irresponsibility and selfishness. I started dating again, but I'm mostly just relieved to be free from my ex and have my house back. Wow, OP, I'm so proud of you for keeping your cool as all of this went down. You managed to inform everyone necessary of what was going on so that you could emerge from this unscathed. Of course, this excludes the emotional turmoil involved in this betrayal, but I have faith in your ability to stay focused on your life's goals. It was so great you were able to call the guy's wife and have her come do the brunt of the work for you. Your wife deserved all of the stress and slaps she endured. You were right to end the marriage, and I'm sure you'll find a woman much better than your ex-wife. I wish you the best of luck with overcoming this situation. Now for today's second story. We started dating in September 2018 on my birthday, so that day has always been extra special to me. My partner does roster work. She works 8 days on a mine site and is back 6 days off. I work a decent 9 to 5 job, so we are both pretty well off. She's also an international resident, so I decided to help her get her visa to stay. We applied for the de facto spouse visa at the end of 2020. For the first 3.5 years, our relationship was really good. We both loved each other and were doing so much together. Unfortunately, some clashes between her and my mom led to us moving out and renting a place for 6 months. She knew how to do everything. She's extremely independent, so she knew how to take care of a house and cooked really good food. I, on the other hand, was a bit of a dropkick and didn't know how to do any of that properly. My mom looked after me a bit too much, which handicapped me a lot when I moved out. Whilst I was working every day and being very smart with our money, we never had any money problems. I was also a bit selfish as a 23-year-old who tended to spend a bit too much time at the computer and away from household chores. I did make sure I spent some time with her though. We watched some good shows like Game of Thrones, Money Heist, and Merlin. I did, however, clean enough to ensure we got 100% of our bond money back. I did all the de-weeding by hand. After our 6-month lease was finally up, we bought a place together. This was around September 2021. She started her mining job around December 2021, and I, still being a dropkick, didn't do much of the housework. Although I did learn to cook some dishes as I needed to make sure I kept myself fed while she was on site. But I still didn't do the laundry or vacuum and mop the floor because my standard of cleanliness was so much different from hers. Instead, I spent my time learning how to invest because she told me she wanted to make a lot of money. I designed an investment plan just to suit her. I enjoyed investing a lot, cleaning not so much. In April of 2022, and she broke down in our bedroom at my lack of help around the house. She told me she was incredibly stressed with having to come back and do all the housework after 8 long days on the mine site. At that stage, I finally woke up and became the adult I should have become long ago. I started vacuuming and mopping the whole house once a fortnight and doing the laundry every week, making sure she had an empty basket to work with when she came back. It was like a switch was flicked on in my head. I should also mention that sex was non-existent in the last year of our relationship. She didn't want to take the pill due to side effects, although she was on it periodically for the first 3 years, and we had sex then. I wanted to buy a pack of condoms, but then she went and hid the condoms when we were about to have sex, so I just refused to have sex with her because I didn't want to have unprotected sex and risk pregnancy. She even suggested that I take the male version of the pill that would make my sperm infertile or something. I don't even know what she was on about there. I kept up my routine, making my own lunches and maintaining the house while she was away. I finally became an adult that could survive on my own, but the relationship didn't seem to improve. Slowly over time, she stopped cooking for me and didn't like me touching her in bed. She also gave me her cheek for kisses instead of her lips. Looking back, these were all red flags, but I was blinded by love and my desperation to save the relationship. I kept up with the cleaning and maintenance. She even went back on the pill to balance her hormones, or so she claimed. I tried initiating sex with her again at that point, but she refused. And then came September 17th, 2022. I was mopping the floor in my computer room and couldn't use it because the floor was wet. I wanted to use her laptop instead and saw everything in Messenger. She had been in a casual but intimate relationship with a man on the mine site a little younger than me. The text messages were extremely explicit. I saw they had this going on since late July. I couldn't go any further back because I was about to throw up. I confronted her about it that night, and she told me she had been extremely stressed with work and had fallen out of love. I didn't understand. She loved me when I was a total tropic. Then all of a sudden, I became this mature and capable adult, but she didn't love me anymore. I was a total wreck for the next week and couldn't sleep well. I decided to call things off with her. I cannot be with someone who commits infidelity. We are going to split up our assets and go our separate ways. She told me she wants to remain friends, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, nor do I think that's a good idea for either of us. This also has implications for her visa. She is currently on her temporary visa until the end of November this year, at which point we were supposed to sign off on some documents so she could get her permanent residency. I told her I refused to sign any documentation as I basically would have to lie, which could get me sent to jail along with a big fine. She may still be able to get her permanent residency if the department decides to award it to her, but she is at a much greater risk of having to go back to a student visa, which means she will lose her mining job. Along with her life savings of having to enroll in some course, she doesn't want to complete and pay international student fees, which are bloody expensive, along with wasting years of her life just to progress her spouse visa all for nothing. OP, this was an exit affair. By the time she began crying to you about your lack of effort, she had already checked out. She unfortunately chose the most immature way to do it. At least you can use this as your own learning experience and personal growth. You didn't deserve to be cheated on. She could have been honest at any time. It would be best if you get to no contact as quickly as possible. Don't kick yourself too much. You were 20 years old when you entered into this relationship. You showed a great deal of maturity when you changed your behavior to help your partner and the relationship. Regardless, you have dodged a bullet, and you will be better off without her. A young man who is capable of living on his own and who can cook and clean is a huge plus in the dating field. Enjoy being single. Thank you for taking the time to listen to 10 years into our marriage. I became very wealthy thanks to the percentage of ownership I had in my father's company. So, I bought my loyal and lovely wife a mansion for us to live in, which came with a butler who was prepared to take care of all the undesirable chores. My work schedule was pretty spontaneous because I could visit the office as I pleased or work from home. Our marriage and life together for the next 20 years after that were blissful other than some odd moments and occurrences. One day, I arrived home from work to find the butler with my wife, standing side by side doing dishes. She was drying, the easier part, but I didn't understand why she was willingly doing any of the chores and standing so close to him. Their elbows touched a few times, and I coughed to let them know I was there. My wife jumped, but he just moved away from her a little bit. She said she felt bad he was in here all by himself, so she wanted to keep him company and help a bit. She was so cheery and warm, I couldn't tell if she had any ill intentions. Another time, I came home to find her lounging in the pool with the butler gardening and staring at her. They laughed a few times before I came out to greet them. It was clear that they were at least friends, but I didn't like how friendly they were. I thought I was just being controlling and jealous, so I accepted that my wife was friends with and cared about the butler. What was the harm in that if I trusted my wife of 17-ish years at this point? We spent every moment I wasn't busy together. I loved her, and I could tell she loved me. Yet another odd occurrence was when I walked upstairs to find the butler closing our bedroom door. It had been hours since I was upstairs because my wife was still sleeping. It was odd, and I asked him if she called for him. He jumped when I spoke and turned around sheepishly, although I could tell he wanted to act normal. He stammered and said she called to ask him for some water. I accepted that for a moment, but reminded him that he was not to enter our bedroom or open the door. He didn't know what to say besides, "Yes, sir." He walked away quickly, and I opened the door to find my wife in her panties drinking water. I asked her if the butler saw her like that, and she said no, she just took off her robe again. I was skeptical. I was heavily considering hiring a new butler. It seemed like she was flirty with him, at least, and I didn't like that he was most likely in our bedroom with my wife in her panties. Before I could terminate him, I saw him smelling my wife's panties. I know, it's really bad, really ballsy. I caught him on the security camera. I told him that was unacceptable and made my wife really uncomfortable. I didn't even tell her about it, but when I told him she was uncomfortable, he instantly looked like he didn't believe me. That ticked me off. I told him he was fired. I hired someone else, this time a female maid since I knew my wife was straight. I decided that even if I was jealous and protective, it was a smart decision. 1 week later, I arrived home to find the maid outside gardening. I went upstairs and found the butler I fired coming out of our bedroom once again. Except this time he was dressed in regular, but still kind of formal, clothes. He looked at me like he was amused, but inconvenienced because I was there and saw him. I asked him what he was doing in my house again, and he told me my wife hired him for something else. He said it with such nerve. All I wanted to do was punch his smug face. I told him to leave and not to come back, no matter what my wife told him. As he walked away, I went into the bedroom and found my wife wearing a skimpy little nightgown. I asked her what was happening, and she looked nervous. She said I was home earlier today than the week before, and I told her she always knew my schedule was spontaneous and not to change the subject. She turned red and told me I was freaking out over nothing. I asked her why she couldn't explain why she was here in her skimpy nightgown after the butler I fired just came out of the room. She was pretty stunned and said she hired him back for things around the house the maid couldn't handle. I asked if one of those things was helping her with her personal plumbing and lubrication. Her jaw dropped, and she couldn't look me in the eye. Her cheeks must have been burning. They were so red. It looked like blood vessels in her face were showing up. It was crazy. Her face never turned that red in all the 30 years we were together. She finally said in a weak voice that if he did help her with that, it was nothing against me. I told her that it most definitely was against me because she belonged to me. We were life partners, and only I was permitted to help her with her plumbing and lubrication. She said she wouldn't ask him to help her again, and asked me not to worry about it anymore. I asked if that meant she was admitting to sleeping with him, and she was silent. She nodded yes very minimally, with her eyes watering. Then she started speaking really fast about how it didn't matter. She just considered it a job. Nothing meaningful that would take away from our marriage, and she needed me to forget about it so that nothing changed between us. I told her this was most certainly going to change things between us, and it already took everything away from our marriage. I told her we were over, called her a name, and told her to get out of my home. I was extremely careful to get a post-nup signed after I came into more money. It's not that I didn't trust my wife at the time. It was because my father and I were lawyers, which means I couldn't ever be made the fool. So my wife sorrowfully packed her bags. She had too many bags for someone with nowhere to go. The butler came to pick her up in the car he afforded with the paychecks I gave him. They stayed in a motel where the butler had been staying after I fired him. My wife had so many belongings, clothes, that she had to leave some of it behind, which I immediately told the maid to sell on eBay, or keep for herself. They stayed in that motel as long as they could, but their money ran out without me signing the checks. They tried to contact me, individually, blaming each other for what occurred and asking me to take them back into the mansion. It was gratifying that they were turning on each other and failing to survive or do anything with their lives. Even to this day, my ex still tries to ask me for help and gives me some updated sob stories about where she is in life. It is not glamorous, it's far from what she was accustomed to with me. I've become something like Bruce Wayne in town, and I have no complaints. Even though her betrayal hurt, I knew from the moment I found out that I could recover from it. Not because of my money, but because I know what love is. And it wasn't that. OP, I am sorry your wife couldn't see what a great life she had with you. I honestly feel like the attention and sexual tension she experienced with the butler was too much for her immature brain to handle. It was a man in close proximity to her that she shouldn't sleep with, no matter how much he would have been willing. He obviously paid her attention, and when their friendship developed, she couldn't keep her legs closed. I believe she was egotistical and materialistic, and didn't have the respect she should for her providing and loyal husband. What this type of woman needs to understand is that resisting temptation pays off in the end. No man should be able to convince them to disrespect themselves and their spouses by breaking their vows and trust. I'm not sure what happened in your wife's head, but we are all here for you to offer support. Now let's get into our second story for today. One fateful day, when my wife went to work, she forgot her phone. I took the opportunity to check it, and was appalled by what I found. I should have known what was going on, because my wife, 25, was extremely excited about going to work suddenly. She said it was because she became in charge of a business task that she really enjoyed. It was something like designing different abstract images each day for a newsletter. I, 28, believed her. She was a good girl, and I was proud of her for earning us additional income for living expenses. The only other dead giveaway was that she didn't want to have sex as often, but then I knew why. It was because she was sexting with a coworker, sending pictures, and talking about the sex they had. It was disgusting. I drove to her work immediately. I backed up all the stuff for her phone, because although she wasn't getting it back, it was going to be deactivated. I brought it with me, and started by showing the receptionist, who I only met once before. Then I asked her if I could get a guest pass to go have lunch with my wife. She giggled and gave me one. She knew I was sarcastically infuriated, and this was going to be a heck of a show. She followed me in, putting up a "be back in 5 minutes" sign that she scribbled out. Everyone looked up from their desks to see me. I must have looked determined and angry. I asked everyone to gather around, and they did. I said I had some news to share about somewhere they all knew well. They were all sparkly-eyed with gossip endorphins when they found out who I was talking about. People started looking around for AP and my wife. AP came out of the bathroom just then, and we all looked at him. I announced that there was a guy who had the audacity to sleep with my wife. Some of the coworkers started shouting out insults at him. Among these, he was called despicable. Just then, my wife's head peeked out of her office. When she saw everyone looking at her, she went back inside and shut the door. Now everyone knew what my wife and AP looked like naked. Some girls whispered that they knew something was going on between them. Coworkers took the time to print/draw signs that said slanderous insults and tape them on my wife's office door. I thanked them for their creativity and left, wondering where the boss was that allowed all this to happen. When my wife got back to the house, I already had the locks changed. She took the stuff I let her have to AP's house. They both quit their jobs that day and walked out shamefully. In our town, there was just one major employer for like half the population. So when I shared with people the things my wife talked about and took pictures of, everyone in the area knew about it or saw it. It didn't take long for them to decide to move about 500 miles west. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. Since she moved out of state, our divorce was made final through the mail. She didn't ask me for anything, thank God. But I would have been able to prove her infidelity anyway. She was done with me and the embarrassing past she was trying to forget. I felt the same way about her and couldn't be happier with the choice I made. OP, I am sorry your wife behaved like an untrustworthy office cheater. It's hard to get as low as a person who cheats on their spouse while utilizing their trust to earn income for the family. What are they even working for if not to improve the life they have at home? If they honestly believe the person they start an affair with at work or anywhere is better than the spouse they have at home, they're wrong. The grass may seem greener on the other side. Finding a person with a new set of features, issues, habits, goals, and interests is completely unnecessary. It is only a shame when a marriage or union ends because one spouse thought they found better in someone else, or just thought they could effortlessly manage two serious relationships. Really, the only grounds for divorce, the proper way to end a marriage, is when one person absolutely cannot or will not honestly communicate with the other person. Thank you for sharing this story. I appreciate your bravery and bold confrontation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story.